Grace, mercy, and peace to you from God our Father and from Jesus Christ our Lord. This is the day the Lord has made it. We are glad and we are rejoicing in it. I want to welcome you to Formation Saturday, a space that we've curated for leaders to gather, to learn, and to grow through candid conversations about faith, ministry, and spiritual development. So today, we want to weave together several important threads. On Sundays at Greater Beulah Church, I am teaching through the Ten Commandments. And this month, we're focused on the first half of those Ten Commandments. No other gods before me, no graven images. Do not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. Remember the Sabbath. We're also tying in Black History Month. For those of you who are Nubians and who follow In Class with Carr, we're calling it the blackest month of the year. And then I also want to factor in what it means to love God as Africans in America with all of our heart, our soul, our mind, our strength. And so this conversation today is going to explore that particularly. And I have a guest with us today, one of my favorite people in the world. We're blessed to have of the Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated, my brother and fellow colleague in the ministry, Dr. Tyree Anderson. Now, let me be clear. Let's be clear. Dr. Anderson has over 20 years of ministry experience. He's working in the national convention, in the state convention, in the area of social justice. I really wanted him for this conversation because his doctoral work is in Black church studies. And so I wanted to bring Frat on to talk to us about what the worship of God looks like from an Africana perspective. We're going to welcome my friend, my brother, my Frat, the Dr. Tyree Anderson. Fred, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing good, man. I'm still recovering from the halftime show with brother Kendrick K. Lamar. Man, I'm still flabbergasted that some of our people who claim to be so connected to our culture and our community missed all the cues that he was throwing out last night. I'm still recovering from that, man. I got a little hangover from it.
Doc, it was some major breadcrumbs dropped in our in that halftime show. From the Samuel L. Jackson bit all the way to a redefining of the Black male presence as it relates to female, how he danced around a woman and never touched her. Then the whole Black girl joy. Remember Serena getting the backlash for doing the crip walk when winning a tennis match, and now she's able to do it freely with no one bothering her. You know, there's so many breadcrumbs.
Man. I think for me, and I just could not stop laughing when he had on that necklace with that small
the lowercase a
as A minor, and nobody really caught that. And I was like, how did y'all miss that? Y'all don't see that? Like, man, you talking about trolling. Even if he did not do the song, the necklace was a glaring statement that I'm still paying attention to you. And I want you to know that I'm still trolling you, even though, you know, you got this fraudulent lawsuit. I know we're going to talk about church, but man, if Biggie didn't sue Tupac for Hit 'Em Up, if Jay-Z didn't sue Nas for Ether, if NWA didn't sue Ice Cube for No Vaseline, who are you to sue somebody in hip hop?
I mean, it is amazing. I love the highlight of that First Amendment right. I love the highlight of the First Amendment right. I want to say it, but they like to sue. Like,
yeah. Oh my God. Oh my God. I mean, man,
especially considering that the First Amendment is the tool being used to strip away some of those very same rights.
that's literally happening right now. That people are suing in order to take away your rights. Your right as freedom of the press, your right as freedom of religion, your right as freedom of expression. They are doing everything they can to take it away. And Kendrick Lamar last night had a black Uncle Sam. He had he had people coming out the car like clowns.
A car that hasn't been made since 1987, the year the man was born.
I know. I mean, it was absolutely brilliant. So for people that didn't get it, man, look, y'all give me a call so I can give you a class on everything that took place, even to the point that he had both Drake's former girlfriends, and one of them is the one that's in question about being a minor. I mean, just absolutely trolled him. It was absolutely brilliant. And it literally speaks to the black genius that's still in us, because we don't have to come out and call your name. You know we talking about you.
Absolutely. It was resistance. It was subversion. It was empowerment. It was black identity. I wish that I was not a preaching calendar kind of guy. If I wasn't a preaching calendar kind of guy, that set list is worthy of some critical examination next to a text.
Exactly.
Because he drew a storyline all the way from Squabble Up, which is somewhat immature, and we're going to draw this line all the way to TV's off.
Exactly.
Game over. Maturity, get involved, get engaged beyond what you see. And then the whole Squid Game, chessboard, PlayStation controller. I mean,
yeah,
every bit of it was intentional.
Yeah. Okay, I'm done. I'm good.
Every bit of it. So I kind of, since we're already here, just the icebreaker question: How does your work in Black church studies inform how you saw that?
Everything you mentioned Nubia, you mentioned narrative. I'm part of that community, and so I'm influenced, and I have been. Let me backtrack. There's a video going around with Charlie Dates talking to white Christians about what they need to do and what they need to be involved in, and I hear what Charlie Dates is saying differently than maybe some other people. Absolutely. It appears that he's chastising them, but Charlie Dates is talking about his own pain.
Absolutely.
Of him needing to, while he was in seminary, get the need to have the approval of his white professors and the books they had to read and all this other stuff. And as I was listening, I began to reflect on my story. I never had a white professor in my Master's of Divinity or my doctoral ministry program. We never read a white book at Virginia Union or when I was at Ashland going through the Black church study curriculum. All my instructors, all my books, everything I did was rooted in Black and Black church. So for me, I've been groomed theologically to listen and to hear and see things through a different lens, where some other people can only see maybe one or two pieces. I'm looking at the double layers and the triple layers of Black church, and how does this impact us as a people, which I'm always raising the question that Sonia Sanchez raised, which is, how does this free us? What are we doing that's going to free us? If it does not move us to be free. Why are we doing it? So my work at First Baptist, my work with Harambee, my work at Selma University, my work with the convention, which I got to catch a flight later to go and get ready for the Congress that's going to be in Montgomery this June. Everything that I've done is rooted in Black church, but here's the underpinning. The underpinning is I have a master's in American history with a concentration in Reconstruction. So my historical training, my historical background has allowed me to be able to have this double lens where I'm looking at history and I'm looking at theology, and I'm like, okay, this theo-historical context in which I find myself, it impacts how I read the Bible. It impacts how I hear music. It impacts how I relate to people. It impacts how literally everything I do is based on that. And it all continues to go back to the Black church because I have been working full-time in ministry since 2003.
In the prison context, right?
No, not just in the prison context. I was executive pastor at the Shiloh Baptist Church in Alexandria, Virginia. Then when I left there, I came to the Bureau of Prisons, and I was the chaplain there for 6 years. But while I was there, I was working with Dr. R.B. Holmes at Bethel in Tallahassee. So I've been working in full-time ministry, drawing my paycheck from church, being in ministry for over 20 years.
Wow. So I'm glad to know that, because that kind of brings us into this first question about this first key question in this conversation about the role the invisible church plays during slavery in shaping an African American understanding of loving God, even though Christianity is being used as a tool of oppression, the slave masters using Christianity in that context. So what role does the early African American church, I'm thinking George Lyle-ish, how does that fit into this?
By the time you get to George Lyle, you already have had the First Baptist Church in Silver Bluff, South Carolina was already established by the time you get to the Lyles and the Bryans, and you get to the First African Baptist Church in Savannah. And you kind of dealing with that component, but you got to go back. You got to go back. One of the things that Dr. Charles Long told us at Virginia Union was that the Black church began on the west coast of Africa and solidified on the whole of the slave ships. In a lecture that Charles Long gave at the University of Pennsylvania, Charles Long said that that the people who control the ship worship the cargo at the bottom of the ship.
My God.
So when you start looking at it, the birth of the song Amazing Grace that the Black church loves so much, which isn't one of my favorites because it was created and brought about because of the suffering of our people. Again, that historical lens, I got the Theo lens that I got. I'm looking at things a little bit differently than somebody supposedly still finding God, and yet he still felt comfortable enough to still transport our ancestors across the water. So I still find that extremely hypocritical. But the invisible church began long before the visible church began. What you mentioned was the visible church.
Absolutely.
That invisible church is the one that knew the difference between the God of heaven and the God that the colonizers used in order to justify their suppression of people. And they knew the difference. And so while they recognize, okay, this is the God you're trying to give us, we're not going to worship that God. We're going to wait until you go down in the wee hours of the night. We're going to go over here away from everybody, and we're going to have our own worship service that's rooted in our African religious context. So they did not adopt all the way what the white people were doing. Here's an example. This idea of being filled with the Spirit, this idea of being spirit possessed, while we take it for granted today, because we say, Lord, fill us with your Spirit. Before me and you get up to preach, we asking God to fill us. That's rooted in African traditional religion. The call and response is rooted in African traditional religion. So when you take a look, we still have vestiges of the invisible church that has helped us understand God as a God of love and not a God of oppression.
Wow. That's impactful. So we have this knowledge of God that predates our slavery experience.
Absolutely, because we were the ones, we can't forget what Dr. Joseph Ben Yochanan actually wrote, and many other writings that come out from people like John Henry Clark, writings that come out from Asa Hilliard, writings that come out from Amos Wilson, that remind us that we were the creators. Africans were the creators of the three major world religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And all of them trace their heritage and their lineage back to the Egyptian religious system of the Maya.
When you mentioned John Henry Clark, he is from Columbus.
I know.
He graduated. He graduated from Spencer High School. Members of our church are graduates and alumnus of Spencer High.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I'm bridging into this next question, slightly different from how I have it worded on the slide, but in the same spirit. So we have this relationship with God that predates our coming across the Atlantic Ocean.
Mm-hmm.
How does this impact our theological interpretation? We know for the conversation we're talking about the first 4 commandments, no other gods, but more so, how's it shaping how we approach the context of Scripture?
Okay. What's that? Year before last, I dealt with that. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Mm-hmm. Now, when you take a look at that in the historical context, this was a attack on the god of Memphis.
Okay.
This idea of I am the Lord your God, I am the one that brought you out of slavery, you shall have no other gods before me. The Memphis god was put. Memphis god was the god was considered the creator god. So now there's this battle between the god of the Egyptians and the god of the Israelites. Mm-hmm. And with this being this battle between them two, the imagery of the god of Memphis is a golden cow or a red heifer. That's the patron god. And the patron god then makes all the other gods. So the 10 plagues that take place in Egypt that's defeated are all the gods that were made by this one supreme God. So by the time they get by the time they get over the water, by the time they get to the other side, by the time you get to Exodus 20, God has said, I've defeated all the other gods. Now I'm going to take on your one high God that y'all have been worshiping all these years. And so the African context, and before I get to African American, the African context is that everybody can have their own God. Everybody can worship the God that they believe is a God until that God is shown to be not a God. Once my God trumps your God, now you're required to worship my God because my God defeated your God.
Absolutely.
So when you get to the golden calf, Moses goes and get the 10 commandments. Moses come back down and God tells them they down there engaging in revelry. When you read the Hebrew, it's not just revelry. They engage in orgy. They are having sexual intercourse in part of their celebration of what they're doing. Moses gets down, breaks the commandments, destroys the cow. The cow again represents the god of Memphis. So we have always had these very theological interpretations. But your question is, what unique theological interpretation emerged from the African American experience? What emerged is that we don't engage, and this is going to throw some folks off, we don't engage in monotheism.
Okay.
We don't. We don't engage in monotheism. We engage in a polytheistic religious context. And that is because we've never worshiped one God.
Okay, I'm listening.
God, now we trying to get our folk to worship this one God. But what happens is that they listen to other people and they are influenced by other doctrines. They are influenced by other theologies. And so on Sunday, they may come to us and say, we love the one true God. But let Jalen Hurts have a bad game and they worship of Alabama kicks in, and now they want Tua to start.
Okay.
So they're not all on the same level. But people in general, like right now, the big God in America isn't God, it's MAGA. Their theology is tied into that the current president was handpicked by God to get things back in the order that God had intended in this nation. And so they go to church on Sunday, but they worship at the altar of Donald Trump, buying his Bibles, buying his shoes, falling in line, worshiping at the altar of Trump, and then saying that they serve the Lord Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And so it depends on your theological context and where you find yourself. And what they've done is they've made graven images. God makes it very clear within them first four that you shall have no images. And
no graven images.
And yet there are graven images in many churches. There are graven images in our city hall. There are graven images. And we make these graven images because we want to be reminded.
Wow. Yeah, so the language I've used is the governing influence in your life is your idol.
Exactly. This is what Dr. Jerome Ross told us at Virginia Union one night. He said he asked us to define faith. And everybody was coming up with all these pretty words and stuff. He said, no, faith is that by which you live by. Whatever you live by, which is your governing principle, whatever you are governed by, whatever you live by, that's what you worship. And when we got people that won't read the Bible, they won't read they won't study, they won't come to prayer meeting, they won't come to Bible study, they won't get involved, but they are fully invested in everything else. That's what you worship.
Yep. Sidebar question. So how in your work do we combat that? Our friend Trent Williams is actually writing his dissertation on that right now.
Mm-hmm.
How do we as the church reel in the minds of parishioners from those other governing influences, governing principles?
One of the things that I did at First Baptist, and I gave it out to a few other pastor friends of mine that I had been talking to about it, is our problem is we don't really know how African we are. Kind of getting back to that first question. Mm-hmm. We don't really know how deep our African traditional religions have been passed down from generation to generation. Okay. We don't realize that we have erected altars, sacred spots, and high places in our lives that keep us divided. Wow. When Gideon was being called by God, God gave Gideon very specific instructions. Instructions were, take your father's seventh bull, take the bull, and when you take them, I want you to destroy the sacred pole, build the altar, destroy the altar, put the bull on the altar, take the sacred pole, use the pole for fire, and consecrate it unto me. Now, that seems just like a very simple thing, but we don't realize how involved witchcraft is in our churches. And we don't know our history. Many churches were started with worship of God and worship of hoodoo. And the hoodoo altars are still in place, as well as the cross that's in our churches. We don't realize that we are still impacted by ancient witchcraft practices while we are still trying to serve God, which goes back to what I was saying, that we have never been truly monotheistic.
So how do we come back from it?
I actually gave them a prayer, a 7-day prayer to actually break the altars. And the members that did it, when they came back after the 7 days, said, Pastor, let me tell you what happened. I had one deacon who told me he had a dream about a little girl that didn't look like a real girl following him around in his dream everywhere he went. And I said, what did you do? He said, I told that thing that was following me to leave me alone in the name of Jesus, and it left just like that. I said, Let me tell you what was following you. That was a monitoring spirit. I said, we don't understand spiritual warfare to understand that there are demons assigned to us to see everything that we're doing, to watch everything we're doing in order to go back and report. This is how you tempt them. This is how you get them. This is what they spend too much time looking at on social media. This is almost like the algorithms in social media. You look at something for too long, your timeline get flooded with.
Yeah. It sounds like you're saying that some of the things that we brought with us from our African heritage open doors for spiritual warfare that has to be shut in order for us to move forward in our walk with God, i.e., no other gods before me, no graven images, don't take my name in vain.
Yes.
Remember the set.
Yes, because as long as there are portals open, and this is something else, this is something I discovered when I was over in Uganda last year. There are witches that pray between 12 and 3 a.m. for the destruction and the downfall of pastors and churches around the world.
Wow.
And many of us that come from the continent, yeah, you might say you an American, but you African, that come from the continent, we're still carrying these family lines.
Absolutely.
They got to be broken. So you got to destroy the altars. You got to close the portals. And once that happens, now we can have this theology that says, I only serve God.
Another sidebar, because this is, I'm very intrigued. Your experience on the continent has included this, huh?
Absolutely. Because, I'm chairman of the of Harambee International Development, was an international humanitarian aid organization. We've been going over there since 2007.
Okay.
It never dawned on me until I was over there this past year that every year, whenever we take teams over, whoever the leader almost gets killed.
Wow.
I just kept saying, man, it's weird. Every time something happens, and as I was in prayer, that's when the Lord showed me. And when I talked to our agent on the ground, who also is a pastor and who family is, he came out of a family that practiced witchcraft, he began to explain that to me. And I said, that makes sense because we are bringing the gospel. And we're bringing clean water, and we're bringing food, and we're bringing resources, and they're seeing that God is providing. So they're leaving the African traditional religions. They're leaving the witchcraft. They're leaving being witches and warlocks. They're leaving that, and they're coming to God. And so if they can kill the leader, they hope that it will stop.
Strike the shepherd and the sheep will scatter.
Exactly.
Okay, I want to kind of tie this in. I kind of want to tie this into the next question, which is around our musical tradition, sacred times, patterns of prayer and praise. We're going beyond just being African American to being African. How does the love of God, the worship of God, how has that been influenced by Africana?
Big time. I mean, when you start talking about the soul, this idea of feeling, not necessarily knowing, but just this feeling. I got a feeling. I mean, think about that song, I got a feeling everything gonna be all right. I don't know for sure, but I got this inkling that's telling me everything gonna be all right. And so what happens is that we are geniuses, not just with the church, and we're losing it. We're losing it because the contemporary Christian music, which makes a lot of money, a lot of our churches are gravitating and have gravitated toward that CCM model of music. And it is deafening and it is killing what God is able to bring out of us, out of our experience. I mean, very well that your theology is based on your life experience. It's your zit and Laban. It's your setting in life. And you can't create music from your heart when you don't acknowledge your setting in life. Absolutely. And so our prayers, our worship, everything that we do is copied and mimicked around the world. But now here we are copying and mimicking other people who don't know God outside of their theories and what they think they believe. They don't even believe. It's almost bad as when the president was asked about his economic plan, and he said that I have a plan of a plan.
Concepts.
I got concept. I got a plan of a plan. Well, you ain't got no plan. And people are listening to somebody who had no plan and is implementing the same plan that the Heritage Foundation been running since Ronald Reagan was in office.
Going back to the Kendrick thing, one of the things that was said, this conversation triggers my thought about that. One of the things that was said was that people look at us and shake their heads. And I'm thinking, yeah, they may shake their heads, but they're shaking their heads because they're trying to figure it out, because they're going to mimic it. They're going to
monetize it.
They're going to
monetize it. I mean, the amount of people,
all the way back to Truck Berry and beyond.
Exactly. They're going to monetize it. They monetize our inventions. Thank God for the traffic light. Thank God for the ice cream scoop. Thank God for the cotton gin. Eli Whitney didn't come up with no doggone cotton gin. That was an African coming up with that so that life could be a lot easier and better, so they wouldn't have to pick as much cotton, not realizing that they were going to take it and make it bigger and make them pick more cotton, so cotton becomes king of the South.
That's right.
So they are going to monetize everything that we create.
Wow.
And here we are, mad, upset, frustrated, because Lil Wayne, Boosie, Cash Money, these folk ain't getting on stage. Yeah, I'm glad they didn't. Yeah. Because we are in a cultural war right now. And what we don't need is folks saying that's the black culture. Lollipop, shake that ass. I mean, no. I mean, you can only perform your sexually derogatory songs in a place that is acceptable. Super Bowl is an international experience.
That's right.
And you don't put thuggery. And I want to make this extremely clear, because I was trying to be nice about it on Facebook last night. You don't put thuggery out and say this is who black folks are.
Absolutely.
No. You put somebody up like Kendrick. You put somebody up.
Pulitzer Prize winning.
Look, they don't even want to talk about that. The fact that he's a winner of one of the top awards that come from them.
The first in his genre. The very first in his genre.
Yeah.
Which means they had to create a section for this guy.
I mean, so, 5 Grammys. I mean, y'all mad, and all they could do is get on stage and be drunk, be high, be staggering around.
And I bring that up, coming back to this question, because just like in the secular arena, they've mimicked and copied.
Exactly.
They come to our church.
And they mimic and copy.
And they mimic and they copy. And so now you go into certain settings with certain preachers and musicians and singers. And while we're running to sound like them, they have adopted our entire church culture.
Listen. When you got the leader of the White House faith-based initiative,
I knew he was going to go there.
You already knew it. I mean, I could have went to Rob Parsley too, but I figured that since I
knew he was going to do it.
Since she's on the docket, might as well call her up when all these black folks are going to her church. All these black folks, and she has demonstrated herself to be nothing but anti-black. She's demonstrated herself to be nothing but anti-black. She has mimicked our preaching. I mean, all of us don't hoop. All of us don't go and tap into that African voice. But here she is, not only thinking she can tap into it, she also thinks she can call them from Africa, angels from Africa, in order to inflict harm upon the Africans that did not vote for the man that said Africa was an S-hole country.
Yeah. Whole continent, but yeah. And so I think the point we're trying to pull out of this question is that when we are authentically ourselves, you can feel it in the room.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I wasn't in the room in Birmingham for the inauguration of Dr. Kimber, but just watching the video of the national anthem being sung in that service,
it made me cry. It made me cry, and to be in that environment. But that gets to one of the pieces you got on here, which is sacred time.
Yeah,
we don't understand sacred time and unsacred time. We don't understand. And the reason why we don't understand it is because sacred time is God time.
Yeah.
It is what we call that kairos. It's not chronos. It's that God ordained time for such a time as this. And we miss that looking for something else.
Because that sacred time is what fuels the musical tradition and the pattern of prayer and the pattern of praise. It's that aloneness with God. The old preacher saying that he gonna walk down to the creek, and when he come back, he got his word from God.
Exactly. Because that time is sacred. And what we've done is we have manufactured fake praise to get folk to shout in our churches.
Wow.
And because we've manufactured it, people have gotten used to a manufactured worship. So now we got to keep the machine going in order to make sure the money come in order to make sure the folk come in. And what we've done is we have engaged in idolatry.
I got to move to this next question because these next couple of ones are great, and I know your time is running low. So I want to talk about community. How has the Black church's understanding of community created space for both spiritual renewal and social resistance? And I think this is the key conversation for where we are right now.
Yeah.
That the solution is going to come from being in spaces created by us for us.
Nubia narrative. You are using that language that we understand completely, because as long as we are isolated or believe in this false notion of individualism, we leave the very presence of God. Because when you take a look at it from Genesis to Revelation, I mean, just take the first 4 commandments. The first 4 commandments of the 10 commandments was about establishing community with God.
Mm-hmm.
This idea of community doesn't just create this space for what you're saying, this spiritual renewal and this social resistance. It also is an identity former.
Absolutely.
It forms your identity, because see, the only way Satan can get to you is if Satan can get you alone. If I can get you isolated, I can destroy you. If I can get you by yourself, I can win. Wow. And that's where Drake messed up. I'm going to use Drake and Kendrick. Where Drake messed up is Drake thought Kendrick was by himself. He didn't realize.
Dude showed up with all the Compton.
He didn't realize that all of Compton, all of Inglewood was with him, both Bloods and Crips, saying, this is our brother. And if you come against him, you got to come against us. Oh, and by the way, we protect our sisters. Keep Serena's name out of your mouth.
Yeah.
So this idea of community is African in content. I mean, this is what we are. This is what we are. You send me an email and say, hey, Doc, I need this. Can you? Without hesitation. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's community.
That's right.
You mentioned Trent. That's community. You coming up for Chris. That's community. We are community. We are not isolated where we are doing our own thing. We are not the Isley brothers. It ain't your thing. Do what you want to do. No, it's about what the community said. And this is another place where we often lose it. We often lose it because we don't realize that we as a community can determine which books of the Bible we want to focus on to build our community. That's where that spiritual renewal come in, and that's where that social resistance come in. Cutting Edge Clergy Caucus, when we formed Cutting Edge, me, Dr. Kirk Clark, and Dr. Ramon Billingsley, when we formed it, we said, what books are we going to use from the Bible to lay out what Cutting Edge is? While we love the 66, we have taken the 8th century prophets, minor and major. We took the Gospels, and we took Romans, we took Acts, and we took Revelation. That's what we took. And so all the work that Cutting Edge does in social resistance is rooted primarily in the 8th century prophets.
So we're going to bring the macro down to a micro so that we can have a concentrated focus.
Right.
You know, which is an interesting concept. We see it in academics. We don't see it much in the general church culture.
Right.
You know, but that's very interesting. I'm very intrigued by that because that builds community in a different way. It creates a certain language.
I give you a prime example. Using what you preaching on now. There are 42 laws of the Mayat. Mm-hmm. Moses grew up in a house of Pharaoh. Mm-hmm. Moses is educated in the educational system of Pharaoh. He's educated in the Egyptian house of spirituality, mm-hmm. which we call the Egyptian mystery system. Not really a mystery, but he grows up in that. When you take a look at the 10 Commandments, the 10 Commandments mimic almost identical 10 of the 42. Wow. It's not to say Moses did it, but God can give something to someone else and they can pollute it. And then God can take what God gave to somebody else that polluted it and then say, but here's the way it's supposed to be. These are the ones that's going to build your community. So they take 10 of the Mayat and then form the 10 Commandments and say, this is the community. First half is God, second half is us. We gonna come together and we gonna be one.
I've been saying lately that just because it's spiritual doesn't make it Christian.
Exactly.
And just because it's real doesn't make it right for believers.
Exactly.
So that 42 law system is spiritual and is real. But that's not how God is building the system for the children of Israel.
Exactly.
For believers by extension.
Now, ask yourself this. Why did God, now we believe God gave Moses 10 Commandments. Why would God use what the people are used to in order to form community? He didn't come up with something they didn't know. And the evidence that they knew it is because when Moses was gone too long, they took the reparations they got from Egypt and told Aaron to make them a golden calf. And how did Aaron know how to make it unless Aaron was a smith in Egypt that knew how to make the golden calf?
Yeah. I literally just talked about those earrings this past Tuesday. I literally just talked about them golden earrings. So I'm loving how this community focus. I love the spin you put on it, that it brings identity.
It does.
Now I'm going to question 5 because this is your area. This question 5 is got Tyree Anderson written all over. What role does truth telling play in the prophetic tradition of the African church, the African American church experience? This got you written all over.
Truth telling, because when I saw that question, I just started laughing. Truth telling separates the wheat from the tare. Truth telling separates the goat from the sheep. Because when you tell the truth, those that have embraced the lie will fight you.
Absolutely.
They're gonna argue, but those who embrace it will get silent and say, I never saw it like that. So truth telling in the role of not the griot, but the jolly.
That's right. That's right.
Jolly. A lot of people don't know what the jolly is. The jolly, for those of us that are in Nubian narrative, were introduced to the jolly by Dr. Greg Carter. The jolly is the one that's the truth teller.
That's right.
It's the one that is going to let you know right is right, wrong is wrong, and we can't, it's not necessarily a storyteller. It's one that's there to provide wisdom and guidance in the community where there is none.
When I think again, Super Bowl in my mind, I've been resisting the urge to put this in the social media space. I see Kendrick Lamar
as a truth teller,
as a jolly one.
Yep.
On the same level as a Dave Chappelle.
Oh man, exactly. Because what Dave Chappelle did with this last Saturday night, I mean, people laughing at the pimp skit, laughing at the, all these other. No. Look at that
Mr. President, Doc.
That monologue.
Oh man,
that monologue. And that's the reason why folk don't like him.
All the way to standing up to talk about Jimmy Carter.
Exactly. I mean, when you take a look at what is taking place, you've got to say something. We are in a community right now. We are in a community of clergy that are not prepared for what's getting ready to happen.
And don't know how to speak to it.
Yep.
And I want to add something to that, just for good measure. And the way you tell truth doesn't have to be monolithic. You can tell truth in more ways than one. For instance, you and I were on a preaching program together.
Right.
And your social justice stood up and talked about Pilate so bad, I felt sorry for the guy. I felt so bad for, like, I wanted to offer him a condolence card, but I came at it from a narrative perspective.
Right.
I built a narrative line that told an equal truth. Exactly. An equal truth, just in a different way. Sometimes you need Nathan, sometimes you need Micaiah.
Exactly. And I tend to be that Micaiah that's going to wind up in Herod's, in Herod or Ahab or Donald Trump prison. I'm gonna end up in some. The running joke when I was at Virginia Union was that I was gonna end up in Guantanamo Bay. It was like, you just don't seem to have a feel. I'm like, no, that's fact, truth's true. And I said the reality is that shock value is what wake people up. Absolutely. And we don't have, like, I got Carrie, I got Chris, I got certain people, and I got to get you the information. Yeah. I got them reading a book on preaching in Hitler's shadow.
I saw the book. I've already ordered.
I got them reading it. And the reason why is because there were preachers that tried.
More than just Dietrich Bonhoeffer.
It was a whole lot more. They tried that. Let me hit this with the narrative side. That wasn't moving. Man, that direct hit, that for what they were doing made Hitler so mad that he created prisons for pastors. Pastors wound up in prison. And the people that went to these churches were helping the Jews survive Adolf Hitler. The same way you see it today with the attack on the Lutheran Church by Donald Trump and his administration, saying that they are Nazis, and just laying all kind of bad claim against them. And that ain't the case. They are simply trying to live out the gospel. And they don't like it when people tell the truth. Because the truth, as Jesus said, the truth will make you free.
Absolutely.
Because see, if they set you free, you can get locked up again. But if you've been made free, you can't be enslaved and you can't be locked up anymore. So truth telling plays a major role in the prophetic tradition that we have. And many of our people have left the prophetic tradition because it makes people uncomfortable. And it says it's bad for our financial bottom line. Absolutely. But if John was a prophet, if Jesus operated in the context of a prophet, if Peter operated as a prophet on the day of Pentecost, if the apostles operated through a prophetic utterance in their work and their assignment, if Paul operated as a prophet, because they trying to make him a church builder, Paul was a prophet. If you pay close attention to what Paul was saying, when you take a look at those that have been used by God, those that have been set aside by God, they are operating in that prophetic tradition. But when we start reading and start engaging in material that nullify the prophetic by listening to folk that say the age of the prophet is over. Well, if the age of the prophet is over, that means that God has stopped speaking. That means that whatever God has said is done. Well, I don't think that's the case, because there was a man who sat in the Birmingham jail one Easter that wrote a letter entitled the letter from the Birmingham jail that Jesse Jackson said was as prophetic as any of the epistles that Paul wrote when Paul was writing to all them folk. You got to understand that the prophetic is still in operation. And just because a person doesn't believe it don't mean that it's not so. There's a lot of people that don't believe God is real, and yet God is real.
I'm glad you mentioned Martin, because we're talking about late Martin, not the early Martin.
Listen. I made it very clear in New York when I went up to preach that we want Martin, that the people want Martin, the Martin that we have been given, that has been desanitized. That Martin is post 66, 67. When he finally sits down and writes, where do we go from here?
Oh, man.
That's a different Martin.
That's a different guy.
That is a different Martin. And that Martin, and this is the other thing people need to understand. The prophetic tradition will get you killed. It won't get you preaching assignments. I was telling my wife about it this morning. Preachers won't invite you to come preach, because they don't want to have to deal with the aftermath of what you're going to say. People don't want to be in a room with you. They want to challenge you on everything. They want to label you. They want to say everything they can about you to make you stop doing what God put in you.
That's what got him killed.
That's what got him killed. Being prophetic about Vietnam. And being able to get them young white kids at them very liberal colleges out in California to join the Poor People's Campaign and to go against the Vietnam War.
He did do it.
And when they started swaying, that's when he became a threat. As long as he was talking about desegregating lunch counters in Columbus, Georgia, or Birmingham, Alabama, we can do that. Yeah. Because y'all talking about staying right there.
But now we're talking about money.
Listen, but the moment that it became international and people in the Vietnam War, when the Vietnamese was quoting King, when you begin to see international policies quoting Dr. Martin Luther King, he became too big for his britches, and we got to take him out.
I'm skipping 6. I'm going to 7 because this is the one I really want to hear your comments on.
All right, bet.
Because of your historical training and your lens, I'm going to 7. This is the question. So what lessons can my generation, the generation and the generations beneath me, I'm a millennial, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, Gen Beta, which is just beginning, Gen Beta is just beginning when they come of age. What can we learn from how the African American church or the African church in America has navigated through cultural Christianity and has demonstrated this Christian devotion over the generations? What lessons are we to take from our forebears as we go forward, especially in the culture and climate that we're in right now?
We got to talk to them. A lot of times we don't talk to them, we talk at them. Mm-hmm. And so when you talk to them, you're talking to them in order for them to understand that the message isn't changing, but the method has. And whatever your method is, you need to use your method to continue this resistance. The Black church is born in resistance. As much as people want to argue and say, why do we have a Black church? Every time somebody asks me that, I say, go ask Church of the Highlands why we got a Black church. Go ask First Baptist. Go ask Hunter Street, since I'm up here in Birmingham area. Go ask Hunter Street. Go ask First Baptist Vestavia. Why we got a First Baptist church in this? Why is there a Second Baptist? Why is there a Mount Calvary? Ask them why we got the Black church. We got the Black church because they didn't want us in there. And so you have to begin to teach the history of where our churches come from. There's a lot of pastors that go to churches and they don't even learn the history of the church. All they're looking for is a place to stand up and shout, not realizing that some of the same fights that took place when the church was started in, say, 1891, you still fighting the same fights. Why? Because you don't know the history. Our young people got to see church not just as viable and valuable. They got to see church as fun. Church should not be boring. Mm-hmm. I was at a church event and somebody was singing and they said, that's what's wrong with the church today. We don't sing these kind of songs. And I'm like, yep, but I'm not singing with y'all. So am I a problem too? Because I don't agree to sing a song that is rooted in our cultural oppression because it was a song that you used to sing back in the day? Many of our young people are doing the research to find out where a lot of stuff comes from, and they're not turned on by it. And this is the thing that they're running to. When they leave the church, they're not going to another church. They're going to witchcraft. The largest growth of faith outside of the Christian and Islamic faith is witchcraft. And more Black women are going to witchcraft, and they're merging witchcraft with what they grew up with. Because they saying, and I mean, it's even to the point that they even said that Jesus was a warlock. Mm-hmm. Jesus was a warlock and he practiced magic. That was how he was able to do all the miracles he did. The miracle of the feeding of the 5,000 and 4,000 was by witchcraft. Mm-hmm. It was because he manifested. See, there are certain words that we're even using in our churches that are given younger generations who know what these words mean for them. Mm-hmm. They got to be taught the definitions of what these things mean. I was talking to my son about running the baseline. Okay, if the ball is scored out of the basket, you can run the baseline. And he was like, why would I do that? I just take it out. I said, because if you take it out underneath the goal and you try and throw it overhead down the court, you're going to hit the backboard. It's going to be a turnover. Why do I bring that up? I bring that up because I had to explain to him the logic of why he needs to do what he's doing. We're not explaining it. We're just telling them you better do it. And so they're not doing it. They need to know Black church culture, not Black church tradition only. Yeah, we've done this because this is tradition, but here's the culture.
I guess Kendrick has been the theme, has been a running theme in this. One of the responses, one of the visceral responses was older generations saying that it wasn't a good show simply because they didn't understand it.
Right.
And so they dismissed it. Then when people who understood it sat down and systematically explained, oh, now I can get with that.
Exactly.
I see the same thing in church.
Yep.
We automatically dismiss it because we don't understand it.
Right.
Because on both sides, we have to see Stephen Covey, 7 Habits. Both sides have to seek to understand.
Right.
Before they seek to be understood.
Right. 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 And see, that's that cultural divide.
Yeah.
That's that cultural divide. I mean, when we're preaching and we hit on something, we got a good feeling that they might not know what we're talking about. We take the time to further break it to the point. Even if we got to say it 4 or 5 different ways in order for them to get it. And then you can see the look on their face of like, oh, I got it.
The light bulb comes on.
Right. We got to do that. And so younger generations need to sit with older generations in order that they might come together. One of the things that came out in the first In Class with Carr for Black History Month, the Blackers of the Black Month, the Blackers of the Blackest Month, was talking about those things that Carter G. Woodson said that you ought to do for Black History Month. One of them was you need to know your family history.
That's right.
Write it down. One of the projects that we can implement in church is for the older generation to sit down with the younger generation and tell them the church family history.
That's right.
Where did that chandelier come from? I mean, out of all the things in here, I got 2 chandeliers in the sanctuary that make no sense. Should not be chandeliers because I got recessed lights. Why do I have chandeliers? So when I walked in the first time, I asked, why do we got those chandeliers? And that's when old deacon told me, he said, Pastor, these chandeliers came from the old church. Let me tell you what their names are. And begin to tell me the names of the chandeliers and begin to tell me the story of the chandeliers. And see, when some folk come in, they see the chandelier and they're like, I don't know why they got chandelier. But that's part of the church's history. That's part right. of the church's culture. So while the physical building that used to be First Baptist Church of Ensley isn't there, guess what is? The lights. The lights. Why the lights? Because it was the lights that lit up the old church. It's the lights going to light up this church. And so I can now take the chandeliers and talk about the history of the church.
Right. That's like with our church. Our church is where it is because of urban renewal is the term used. Is the term used in the church history. We were relocated because of urban renewal.
Now, see, that wasn't a prophetic person. That was a truth teller that was writing that, because I would have said it is because of gentrification, and I would have thrown some folks under the bus for good posterity, because the young folk need to know exactly who did it. So when their children run for office, they can say, absolutely not. Your daddy is the reason why our church got moving. We're going to fight against you.
That's right. Exactly. We need to know that. Yep. That history has to be said in ways that can be received and accepted. And on the other end, can be appreciated.
Yeah. Yeah, you gotta have some Kendrick Lamar in you. You gotta be able to tell the story on how to pimp a butterfly. You gotta let some folk know they ain't like us.
High power. Doc, man, I appreciate your time. You have been extremely generous. Anything else you want to add to this cherry on top?
Just make sure that when you do the work, do it with a level of intentionality, because the work you do is going to last. If it's half done, it's going to be half lived out. Mm-hmm. But if it's with full intention and you got a full focus, man, go hard in the paint. That's it. Just go hard in the paint.
You got a new book just come out, right?
I do, man. I got it. It's on order now. It should be here, and it's crazy. I'm leaving today. The books will be here tomorrow. So, but yeah, I got a new book. I got a new book that's called A Call to Action, and Call to Action subtitle is The Black Church and Civic Engagement. How does the Black church engage in the political arena? How do we position ourselves to actually get the power we're supposed to get in a society and in a culture that has told us, just come vote for us, we're not going to help you, including from Black politicians. So I got an entire strategy dealing with how does the Black church get involved in everything from canvassing to building your own candidate, because that's where the number one problem is that if the Black church decides to create a 501c4, if the Black church creates a 501c4, not a 501c3, 501c3 will not allow you to engage in politics. 501c4 will, because that is the lobbying arm of the IRS 501 codes. So you create a 501c4 and you create a political organization that's not only going to endorse candidates, because you can, not only will you be able to lobby for money in order to do it, you can actually begin to recruit and train and build your own candidates to run for every office that's available.
Wow.
And we have not operated or moved in that direction because we have been sold a bill of goods to disempower us, called a 501c3. So what you do is you build both. You build your 501c3 and you build your 501c4. Your 501c3 will carry out your service projects. Your 501c4 will put the people in office to give you the money for your 501c3 to carry out the work that got to be done. There's an entire strategy that has been in play for a long time, and we're still not up on game.
Wow. And I think I saw you said you was working on a follow-up to this.
I am. I'm actually working on a follow-up to this, which is a 365-day social justice devotional.
Wow.
And that's going to be a link for this, because everybody is doing these great devotionals. You know, at First Baptist, we read devotionals every year, 365 days. For years, we've been reading E. Stanley Jones. I changed it up this year to read this one devotional, Salt and Light, which is absolutely amazing. But I got to really thinking about, in this culture and climate in which we find ourselves, what are we going to do? How are we going to fight? Because if these devotionals are telling us to trust God, that's only one side of the equation. The other side is God is saying, you better get up and go do something. That's where that social justice liberation piece comes in. So I've been collaborating with a few of my brothers from Virginia Union, and we are putting together a 365-day devotional focus on social justice.
Wow. Man, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for your time. Got to do this again.
Yes, sir. Well, I'm on my way to go teach this class in Selma now. So let me log off of here and log on to the next one.
All right, we'll talk.
All right, go Mark.